So January 2017, the regional leadership team of Westfield Mall called an emergency team meeting. The reason for this call, the reason for the emergency team meeting is that tenants on the 4th floor of their downtown San Francisco City Center Mall were moving out. As they dug into the data and started talking with the tenants, one of the things that they discovered is that despite the fact that the 4th floor boasted panoramic views of the city and had beautiful fresco ceilings painted to boot, yet tenants were moving out because very few customers were actually coming to the 4th floor of the mall. And they couldn't afford to continue renting there. And so the management team of Westfield convened a meeting to address this looming crisis. And the question of the meeting is effectively, how do we drive customer foot traffic to the 4th floor? They called in the brightest minds from marketing and real estate operations and legal and compliance, and they put all their cognitive effort on this challenge. How do we drive traffic to the 4th floor? Otherwise, we're not going to have the kind of rent revenues we need. And in a downtown urban city center, we can't afford to have tenants moving out of such a premier real estate. So I think Perry's posted in the chat there questions. What would you put on the 4th floor? And this team engaged in a rigorous brainstorm. Most research suggests that many brainstorms never exceed 2 ideas in total output.
Yeah,
and you can imagine
we just broke through. Awesome.
We just got more than 2. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. All kinds: live music, food courts, signage,
and M&M stop.
Oh, wood-fired hot tub spa center. Signal. I love it. A surprise daily. That's a good idea. There's so many good ideas. Scavenger hunt, free drinks, puppy cuddling. There we go. Outlets, loads of ideas. I wish we were on the team for
Westfield. Cuddling.
Divergent ideas.
All right, so suffice it to say, this brainstorm that we just engaged in 10 minutes probably explored, I would say undoubtedly explored a much broader and more radical territory than the territory the Westfield team explored. If you think about why, it makes a lot of sense, right? They're concerned with implementability. They're concerned with feasibility. They're concerned with addressing the problem quickly and doing something that's in their wheelhouse, right? And so even the breadth of their divergence was probably constrained somewhat. But one of the ideas that rose to the surface, and an idea or that rose to the top of the heap, so to speak, and an idea that we thought wasn't that bad, was the idea of putting a beer garden in the 4th floor. And as the team heard that idea, and as they started kind of spitballing what it could look like, everybody got intoxicated or entranced with this idea of a bunch of Silicon Valley startup founders, ascending the 4th floor like Greek gods at Mount Olympus, sipping ambrosia, looking over the cityscape views, and everybody started feeling a little intoxicated at the possibilities. But the question still persists. How do we know if this is a good idea? We have an idea, and we can speak about, and we already have to some degree in the former talks, the kind of volume required to get to a good idea and the kind of divergence needed to get to a good idea. But assuming you get any idea, the question still remains, should we invest resources in this particular direction? And how do we know whether we should invest resources in this particular direction? The team at Westfield had to answer this question first. And so what they did is they sent an army of interns and employees to the 1st floor where there was already a food court. And they interviewed people, and they had clipboards in hand, and they started asking people, if we, Mount Olympus, picture this, we got a vision, we have a dream. If we put a beer garden on the 4th floor, would you come? Would you check it out? And they talked to not just a few people, they talked to 1,000 people. These are actual human beings who visit this exact location. And they talked to a lot of them. And you know what the response was? It was, you may not be surprised to discover this, it was overwhelmingly positive. Over 80% of people who they surveyed said, if you build it, we will come, so to speak. That'd be amazing. I'd love to view the cityscape with a, frothy IPA in hand. It sounds amazing, right? And so armed with this trove of data and enthusiastic also about the possibilities, the idea and how it appealed to them individually and how imminently implementable it was. It drew upon existing capabilities and resources, et cetera. The Westfield team charged ahead with building out a pretty beautiful 4th floor beer garden. It took a few months, obviously, but once they built it out, the executive team that had commissioned the effort enthusiastically awaited the results. And when they finally got the data back, they found out less than they expected visited. About 10 people visited, but surely that's 10 people a day, right? As they discovered, it was actually 10 people total over more than a month had ascended the Mount Olympus, so to speak, to visit the beer garden. And they were devastated. They invested a great deal of energy and resources and their hope in this idea, actually. And we see that happen a lot. Many times, an idea is implemented, and if the data doesn't bear out, the team's okay with it. But the problem often is, that was our billion-dollar idea. That was our good idea. And we invested a lot of money in expecting it to work. And when the Westfield team came to us, they came to invite us to contribute to a post-mortem of sorts, where we unpacked what were the cognitive barriers, flaws, procedural mistakes that were made that allowed them to make such a monumental mistake, such an expensive and costly mistake. And what could they do? Because they not only had the 4th floor problem in San Francisco, but they had a host of other problems that they realized if they continued to employ the standard means of generating ideas, evaluating ideas, and implementing ideas, they were likely to encounter costly failures again. So they came to us with this question: what do we do differently? And that's what brings us to the subject at hand in this 3rd Masters of Creativity talk.